having mentioned Sadie, the destroyer of worlds, our lad pup, on Easter Sunday morning, it turns out that I have a new Sadie story for you, which I suppose is both good news and bad news. At any rate, here it is. As some of you know, my wife drives a Lexus sedan. Now, that's a nice car, but it's also an old car. In fact, it's almost 10 years old now, and with a car that old, no matter how nice it may be, things begin to wear out, right? A while back, the remote control key fob that's on the keychain but separate from the key fell apart, basically, so that it became possible for the actual electronic device inside of it, the thingamajig, if you will, to fall out. And, of course, that's precisely what happened. In fact, it had just happened the other night when my wife asked me to go get something out of her car for her. And she reminded me that I'd have to use the actual key, as the remote wouldn't work without the thingamajig. So I'm walking up to the front part of the house to go out to the car, and I see Sadie, sweet, innocent Sadie, sitting up on her haunches going, right? And it occurs to me in that moment that we need to find the little thingamajiggy fast before Sadie does, right? At any rate, I go out and get to the car, and I unlock it with the key, and suddenly there is a ghost in the machine. As if by magic, the lights start to flash on and off, and the horn starts blowing, and I step back from the car, right? And the lights are flashing, and the horn is blowing, and you guessed it, Sadie, the destroyer of worlds, had found the thingamajig. Sure enough, when I got back into the house, she had it in her mouth. And with the lights would flash, and the horn would blow. So I'm thinking, well, maybe there's hope, right? So I get it out of her mouth and go outside and start pushing the buttons. Nothing. Sadie, the destroyer of worlds, has killed the thingamajig. So now I have to tell my wife. Actually, it occurred to me that I didn't have to tell her at all, right? I mean, the thing was lost. It could just stay lost. No harm, no foul. No wiser, right? But then I thought, well, it was such a good story, I couldn't keep it to myself. So I told her. Y'all, she didn't think it was funny at all. Even now. And what ensued was yet one more of those occasions when, in Denise's mind, Sadie was not our dog, but rather my dog. It's a good thing she's a cute dog, or she might be a... You got it? I won't say it, but we'll think it. At any rate, so the continuing saga of Sadie, the destroyer of worlds. This morning is the second Sunday in the season of Easter. As I hope most of you know, Easter, like Christmas, is not just a day, but rather it's also a season in the Christian calendar. And while Christmas is 12 days long on the first day of Christmas, right? Easter is actually 50 days long, the so-called Great 50 Days of Easter, ending with the Feast of Pentecost, which this year falls on the 19th of May. So we have a ways to go. You can still be wishing people happy Easter for a while. Now, this being the second Sunday in Easter, this morning's appointed gospel is the story of doubting Thomas, which is traditional on this day. And as such, this day is actually sometimes referred to as Doubting Thomas Sunday. Now, when you think about it, it really makes good sense that the Doubting Thomas story would be read on the second Sunday of Easter. I mean, after all, last week we boldly proclaimed that God had raised Jesus from the dead. It is an amazing proclamation, and one that is bound to elicit doubt and skepticism. So what better story to read, you see, on the second Sunday of Easter than the story of doubting Thomas. Moreover, the punchline of that story, which is down at the bottom of that passage, when Jesus says, "Have you believed because you have seen me, Thomas? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe." The punchline of that story has lain at the very heart of the Christian faith pretty much ever since, right? I mean, of course it has. For ever since the first generation of Christians perished from this earth, ever since the eyewitnesses to the risen Christ, in fact, died, it has been the fate of every Christian, you see, to believe without seeing for 2,000 years, right down until today. So far, so good, huh? But there's a problem with the story of doubting Thomas. There is, if you will, a rub. And the rub is the mark of the nails and the wound in the side that Thomas is allowed to inspect. It's a rub, you see, because it makes Jesus appear, I said appear, to be nothing but a resuscitated corpse. And of course, we don't believe in a resuscitated corpse. We believe in the risen Christ. I got to thinking about that. And you know, I suspect that in fact, most Christians, if they think of it at all, believe that Jesus was alive, that he died, and then he just came back to life. Which is in fact the thing that happens in emergency rooms and operating rooms every day. But in fact, Jesus didn't come back to life in the conventional sense. Rather, God raised him from the dead, which is a very different thing indeed. Now, if you don't believe me, I would simply invite you to carefully peruse 1 Corinthians chapter 15, wherein Paul goes to some pains and in fact great lengths to describe and characterize that which he refers to as the resurrection body. The resurrection body. In fact, it's the only discussion of the resurrection in the whole Bible, insofar as I know. And the main thing you need to know about the resurrection body is that it is vastly different from the earthly body. It is simply not the same. It has changed. It has been transformed. Paul writes this: "The body that is sown is perishable." What he means by that is the body before it dies is perishable, but it is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, but it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is sown, get this, a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body. Now, I didn't write that. St. Paul wrote that. It's important that you understand also that here St. Paul is speaking mainly about the risen Christ. He is saying that Jesus was categorically different after the resurrection than he was before. Moreover, he says that the risen Christ was and is, get this, imperishable, glorified, powerful, and spiritual. Which is why I've always struggled to understand the print of the nails and the wound in the side in the doubting Thomas story. Now, please hear me well. I'm not saying that I don't believe it. I'm not saying that it wasn't that way, nor am I suggesting that it was some sort of fabrication, as some perhaps believe. I'm simply saying, I don't get it. I don't get it. Which is, of course, precisely the point. And the point is this: the risen Christ, and more specifically, the resurrection body of Jesus, is simply beyond our comprehension. That it was is not in doubt. What it was, we got no clue. None. Get this. In virtually, and I know this is repetitive. I've said this before, but it bears repeating. In virtually every single resurrection appearance of Jesus, as the risen Christ encounters a variety of people in all four Gospels, every time the same thing happens. People who have known Jesus for years do not recognize him. And then later, they do. Time after time after time after time. Y'all, Mary Magdalene thought he was a gardener. Okay? Now, you know, that's just plain weird, isn't it? That doesn't happen in real life. In fact, you can't make it up. It's a mystery. Thank God for mysteries. Moreover, apparently the risen Christ could pass through locked doors and walls and eat and presumably digest fish and bread at the same time. Once again, you can't make it up. If you could, Hollywood would have figured out how to do it. But they haven't yet, and they won't. Listen, the risen Christ was not a ghost, nor was he a resuscitated corpse, in modern parlance, a zombie. Rather, the risen Christ was something else altogether, something completely beyond our comprehension, something beyond our very ability, you see, to comprehend. But that should not surprise us, for spiritual teachers have been telling us for centuries that if we understand it, it's not God. If we understand it, it's not God. Here's the payoff. And it's a doozy. You ready? The Bible teaches that one day we will have resurrection bodies just like Jesus, imperishable, glorified, powerful, and spiritual. Spiritual bodies. You can't make that up. Given that, it seems to me that there's a very good chance that we will be able to fly. Right? Spiritual bodies? Right? You with me? I must tell you, I'm looking very forward to that aspect of eternity. Moreover, if that's not good news, I don't know what is. Amen.